Good morning and welcome to NSDCR's webinar on clear cooperation and the top MLS violations with Jeff Smetana, Director of Compliance and Data Licensing at CRMLS. Before turning the webinar over to Jeff, I wanted to remind everyone to register for tomorrow's special chit chat with Steve Murray. Steve will share how to get to a prosperous future in real estate, so be sure to register today. Now here's Jeff.
Hey, good morning, everybody. How are you doing? I hope you're well and not getting too tired of these Zoom meetings. I know I think I'm up to about 100 in the last couple of months, but it seems to be working, and I'm thankful that we even have the opportunity to use something like this. Otherwise, what would we do? So we're going to talk about the clear cooperation policy today, and then I will probably open up another PowerPoint and take you through some top violations. It's a lot of material, so I'll try to move quickly. For the sake of questions and back and forth, I would ask that you use the chat box, which if you scroll down to the bottom of your screen while you're on Zoom, you'll see a little button pop up. It's a little word bubble, and if you click on that, that will be your chat box. So if you type your question in there, I'm going to stop from time to time during the presentation and try to clear out a bunch of questions. If I don't get to your question or if I don't answer your questions in the presentation, we have so many resources on our website that probably will help you out a great deal. We have a lot of FAQ sheets that most of the time answer the questions. I'm going to try to deal with the ones that are more significant, depending on how much volume we have in there. I may not be able to get to them all, but I will point you to the resources page here during the presentation, and maybe if we don't get to you in this presentation, you can go there and dig into some of our resources and hopefully get some help from that source. So it is 10:01. We've got about 29 people in here, so I feel like it's going to be manageable. Again, feel free to put your questions in the chat and we will get going. So I'm going to share my screen and we're going to talk about the clear cooperation policy. So let's see. Okay, so I think you should be able to see that. That's my slideshow. All right, so before we get going, maybe some of you have heard this presentation before, or maybe you've already done some education type stuff for the clear cooperation policy. That's great. If you have, this will be a refresher for you, but if you've not, let me take you down a little bit of some background roads here. You might not even understand what the concept of cooperation is, and then what is this policy that's called clear cooperation policy. So real quick explanation. Cooperation is the concept, it's the foundational concept of a multiple listing service. Cooperation is that agreement that you make when you join that is saying, I will put all my listings in this service so you can see them and sell them. You know, you're saying that to everybody else, and everybody else is saying that to you. So that's the concept. Cooperation, brokers all come together, put their listings in there, and then they can make deals, and they have offers of unilateral offers of compensation in there. So if you bring that buyer and the terms are met, then you'd be entitled to that compensation. So it's really just that clearinghouse where everybody comes together, but you are voluntarily agreeing to do that. So what happens is, from time to time, some brokers don't want to put their MLS or their listings in the MLS. They are part of an MLS, but they don't want to put that particular listing or maybe a group of listings in the MLS like they've previously agreed to. You may have heard the term off MLS listing or office exclusive or the world famous pocket listing. All of those terms refer to that situation where there's a broker who's a member of an MLS and yet they're taking a listing and not putting it in as they previously agreed to. So they're saying in that sense, I'm not going to cooperate, right? So this has been going on for quite some time. It has not been impermissible. It has been allowed. It will still be allowed, but to a far lesser extent. All right, so you can still have MLS. You can still be a member of an MLS and keep your listings off the MLS, but if you publicly market, you're going to have to put them in. And that's really the gist of this. I'm going to talk about the details, but that's the big concept here. So what happened was NAR, National Association of Realtors, has been dealing with this and the controversies surrounding this off MLS listing situation for quite some time. And then last year, the beginning of the year, the issue came before the Emerging Issues in Technology Advisory Panel. So this is a panel of brokers and agents who are a sort of subcommittee of the MLS committee. And they worked on this and came up with some language and a potential rule in the form of a policy. And then they kicked that over to the MLS committee, who then took it to the floor and pushed it out there for public comment and discussion for many months. And then ultimately in November, it was voted upon and approved by the MLS Policy Committee, who then sent it to the Board of Directors for NAR, and they approved it as well. So this thing now has to become a reality, right? So at that point, the Board of Directors for NAR said to all of their MLSs, their association-owned or affiliated MLSs, okay, everybody, here's this new great policy. You need to take this and make it a real thing for your users. In other words, you have to come up with an implementation plan. You have to put it in your rule set and then go out there and educate everybody as to what it means and how it will work. So that's where we are. The deadline to implement this was May 1st of 2020. So this thing has been live for over a month now. We did meet that deadline. We got it out there by May 1st, and it has now been in effect. So let's talk about what actually happened. What you see on the slide right now is the policy itself. This is the language. Okay, and what it says is within 1 business day of marketing a property to the public, the listing broker must submit the listing to the MLS for cooperation with other MLS participants. That is the heart of this thing, that sentence. As I've said, in the past, a broker could keep their listing out of the MLS by filing an exclusion form or a waiver, maybe some of you know it as a waiver, and then they could do what they wanted, right? They could sell it however they wanted. Well, the big change here is that you can still do that, but you can't market it to the public without triggering this rule. So again, in the past, you could exclude and market it however you wanted with no consequence. Well, that has changed. If your seller wants you to exclude their listing from the MLS, either for a period of time or for the whole term of the listing, you can still do that. But once you market to the public, now you've triggered the rule and you have to push it into the MLS. So that's really what's changed. If you never exclude listings, if your business process does not include situations where you're not putting a listing in the MLS, you're always just taking it and putting it in, well, this really isn't affecting you. Okay, it's not going to change your business process other than for you to be educated about it in case you wanted to report something like this. So that's the core concept. The next sentence of the policy goes on to try to define what marketing is, because that is the event that triggers the submission rule. And it says public marketing includes, but is not limited to, flyers displayed in windows, yard signs, digital marketing on public-facing websites, brokerage website displays, including IDX and VAL, digital communications, marketing, email blast, multi-brokerage listing sharing networks, and applications available to the general public. So that's a lot. It's a fairly comprehensive definition of marketing. Probably doesn't include all the examples that are possible. What is marketing really, guys? It's very reasonable and intuitive to know what marketing is. It's really any efforts you make to communicate to the public about a listing or about a property that you're trying to sell. Whether or not it's on this list, it would probably still be included because, as you see, the rule says it includes, but is not limited to, all these examples. So that's the policy that NAR came up with. Please note at the bottom of this slide, it does tell you that there is only a few different property types that this policy applies to. Residential, residential vacant lot, and residential 1 to 4 unit properties for sale. So if you only do lease listings, this policy does not concern you. You only do commercial or multi-unit or mixed use. You don't have to worry about this if you publicly market. You're not going to trigger anything. Only residential, vacant land, and 1 to 4 for sale. So that's the policy. Here at the MLS, then we were tasked with taking this thing and making it a rule. So this is the rule that is now in your rule set, Rule 7.5.1. It's basically the same thing that's in the policy with a few minor tweaks. It reads, within 1 business day of marketing or advertising a residential property to any member of the public, for sale, which contains 1 to 4 units, or as a residential vacant land lot, which is subject to any exclusive right to sell or seller reserved listing agreement. So let me stop right there. In the NAR rule, they just said property. Okay, so if you're marketing a property, we've tried to refine this a little bit. We've actually made this change within the last week to where it says now that you're only triggering this rule if you have a listing agreement, right? Because before the interpretation was, well, any property you market, even if you don't have a listing agreement, now you're going to have to put it in the MLS. So we've changed that. Now the only folks who are subject to this, or the only properties that are subject to this, are those that are bound by a listing agreement, exclusive or seller reserve. What that means is you have no listing agreement and you are somehow marketing a property, living dangerously, as I like to call it, you are not going to trigger this rule. And or if you have an open listing agreement, which you know what those are, you are not going to trigger this rule either. Okay, so again, the policy unchanged, just a little more clear in this rule. And then we go on to define what marketing is in the second sentence, and it's basically the same thing as the NAR rule. We have added a few different tweaks, including an open house or verbal communications, right? Because you can certainly market in person. We've also added something at the bottom here on the last sentence, and this is important that we're helping to clarify. The question is, who is the public, right? So the rule says if you market a property to the public, right? So the rule goes on to tell you what marketing is or isn't, but in the NAR policy, it didn't say anything about who is the public, right? So we've tried to help clarify that, because if there's a group of people that you, by marketing to, you trigger the rule, you need to know who those people are. So what we've done in the last sentence is try to draw some clear lines. And the first line is any individual or entity that has signed within the previous year a disclosure regarding real estate agency relationship form, that's an AD form, in compliance with the California Civil Code, that identifies the listing broker shall not be considered a member of the public under this rule. So here's a group of people that are not the public. In other words, you can talk to them and market to them and not trigger this rule. And that is distinguished by anybody who has signed an AD form with your brokerage in the last year. And the rationale behind this is not everybody you work with is a client or a customer. Right? You have people on your mailing list from 10 years ago. You've got people you did deals with 5 years ago. But then there are a group of people who you're actively working with. And the likelihood that you're going to get into a deal, or at least trying to get into a deal with them, is very high in the near future. Well, that person is not necessarily the public. That's really your customer. So we would distinguish those folks by having that AD form signed with your brokerage in the last year. So you've seen the words. That's a lot of words. This is more of a graphic slide that covers the 2 key points of the policy. Number 1, who is the public? And number 2, who is what is marketing? Again, the public is not anybody who signed an AD form with your brokerage in the last year. Also, any agents in your office. So I don't mean any agents in your giant worldwide real estate company or in your franchise. It only includes agents who are under the same broker's license as you. So if you go on the DRE website and you look up your broker, there's going to be a list of agents and broker associates under that particular broker. Anybody who's on that list is not the public. So how does this, what does this look like? So if you take a listing and your seller says, I don't want this on the MLS, I want you to try to sell it in your office, you can do that, but you can't market to the public. You can talk to the folks you have the AD form signed with or the other agents in your brokerage. You go outside of those lines, you're probably marketing to the public, and it's going to trigger the rule. So what is marketing? Again, here's some little pictures that help you realize, remember what that is. Public portals or syndication sites like Zillow or Realtor.com, those are global, so that's definitely the public. Your social media is generally being pushed out to the public. Big broker meetings or big events where you're talking about listings to more than the people who are just in your office. Signs, open houses, flyers, email blasts, personal meetings, anything along those lines that where you're making an effort to create some appeal or generate some buzz about a listing that you have is going to be marketing. So what has changed in regards to workflow? Well, looking at this slide, I want you to be aware of that part at the top that says the old version of Paragon. That's just referring to the version of Paragon that you're on now. It's old because it's the same version that was there when there was a big split down south, down in San Diego, and SDMLS came to pass, and then a bunch of folks went over to CRMLS. Part of the agreement in that split was that everybody would stay on that same Paragon version, and it's still in place. There's a new version coming, though, in September. The old version only had to stay in place for 2 years. In September, you're getting a new version. You'll wake up one day and you'll have the new version of Paragon, and things will be great. I'll tell you about some more of the special features there. So the old process has been long-standing, right? You guys are very aware that for years and years and years, there's been the mandatory submission rule, which is basically says that once you get a listing, you have to make a decision within 48 hours, right? You have to either exclude it by filing a waiver or put it in the MLS. So that's still the same. The options that you had in the past were only to put it in as active or to exclude it. So we're going to have some changes to this. And the new process is what you see on the screen now. So the 48-hour rule is still in place. That's not changing. You still have to make a decision once your listing agreement is executed and effective. You still have to either put it in as active or exclude it, but now we have a new option, which is the coming soon status. So you have two options to put it into the MLS, two different statuses, or you can also keep doing the exclusion and keep it out of the MLS. So that clock that starts when your listing agreement is effective is still there. It's always going to start with the listing agreement. But at the same time, there's now this other potential clock that could be triggered by you doing public marketing. This may or may not take place, all right? And so what does this look like? Quick hypothetical. Let's say you have a listing agreement and you get the first signature and you're waiting on that second signature. But in the meantime, your marketing department pushes out your social media campaign, or the sign company shows up and puts up your sign, and you're still maybe 5 days away from getting that second signature. So what's happening here is you haven't triggered the first clock because your listing agreement isn't effective, but you triggered the other clock, the marketing clock. So if you have a listing that's not in the MLS yet for any reason, or even if you've excluded it, you can't market to the public without triggering that other clock. So it's pretty simple. I know we're talking a lot, but it's pretty straightforward. So I'm going to stop right now and take a couple of questions. Actually, you know what? Let me finish this slide real quick, and then I'll get to some of the questions I see in the chat. So the new process for the upgraded version of Paragon, which is happening in September. So make a note of that. What you're seeing on the slide right now is going to be available to you in September. Is the same situation. If you get a listing agreement, you still have to make a decision on what you're going to do. And within 48 hours, you can either put it into active or coming soon, or you can register it. So that's that red part under 2A. Guys, this is just a replacement for you submitting your exclusion forms to the MLS. You still need to get instructions from your seller if they're going to exclude their listing, but you don't have to send it to us anymore. You are always having to send it to us, but in the future, you won't have to. You're going to be able to just go in and register it by putting in 5 pieces of information. So that's what it's going to look like then. And before I get into this slide right here, let me just take a couple of quick questions in the chat. Give me a second to look these over. Helena, you've said to ignore your question. Okay, I will. Tina is sending the information to a couple private clients or another agent before activating the MLS marketing for this section. It generally is, yes. So if you have a listing agreement and you haven't put the listing in the MLS yet for whatever reason, and you are then sending information out, if those folks that you mentioned in your hypothetical, if you don't have the AD form signed with them, or that agent is in another office, then that is the public, and you would have triggered the rule. And then Barb, let's see. That's a lot of questions in there, Barb. Broker, actual managing broker, signator. No, so again, when I say the agents in your brokerage, I mean only the other agents under the same common broker's license, and that would be your responsible broker. Okay, that's what it says on the DRE website. It doesn't mean if you're in a CB office or a C21 office or a KW office that you get to go out and talk to every other office, right? There might be situations where a broker has more than one office, okay, and that's fine. But it might be that there's only one broker's license for that particular office. So if you go outside of that broker's license number, then you'd be going out into the public, and that would be marketing. All right, so looking at this slide here, I want to go over some of the specifics on the statuses. As in the past, right, active is always an option. Once you take your listing agreement, you've got 48 hours to decide what you're going to do with it. You can either put it in the MLS or exclude it. You can put it in the MLS as active. That's one of your choices. An active listing is completely the same as it's always been. The characteristics of an active listing, as you see on the slide, marketing is completely allowed. This whole idea of who's the public, who is not, doesn't matter because it's in the MLS, right? You market it however you want. It's your listing. It's fully displayed in the MLS, which means it's not hidden. It's totally searchable. Goes in your saved searches, shows up on the hot sheets, everything like that. Nothing secret about an active listing. Commission is offered because you're selling it in the MLS. You have to offer compensation so that if someone brings that buyer and the terms are met, then you have to pay what you're offering there. DOM counts. DOM stands for days on market. Why does DOM count? Because it's being marketed, right? That's intuitively correct. If you are marketing it in every way, then you are getting days on market counted against your listing. It's fully distributed through the MLS, which that means it's going out from the MLS to third-party sites. If your broker has opted in to syndication for Zillow and Realtor.com and Homes.com, it's going out to those sites. It's also going out to all of our IDX feeds. Those are the feeds that feed all of the broker and agent websites out there in California. We have over 22,000 of them. And then, of course, showings are allowed. So an active listing is just out there. It's going, it's live, everybody can see it, you're showing it, you're marketing it. Nothing changed about that. So that's always been an option, and it still is. But we have this new status, so they're in the middle, coming soon. This has been available to you now for several weeks. It is a special status. It's been asked for a long time. And the rationale, the request that's always sort of been spelled out for why do you need a coming soon status is this. You have a listing, you have a seller who's eager to get going, but the property's not 100% ready to meet the world, right? It's got repairs going on, the seller is going out of town, maybe you have a tenant that needs to be relocated, or you need staging and painting and signs and professional photography, all of these things that might limit the ability to get it out there and for everybody to see and come and show the property to. So a coming soon period has been requested for a time period to get all that stuff taken care of. And while you are doing that, at the same time, to not get hit with days on market, because you're not marketing it 100%. It's on the MLS, you're sort of generating interest, but it's not fully marketed, so you don't get hit with days on market. So this is now here, and it's a reality for you. A coming soon is very similar to an active. As you see, marketing is allowed. You can put up a sign on a coming soon. You can make flyers. You can talk about it. You can put it on your website. You can put it on your social media. You can market it in pretty much every way, just like an active. It's displayed in the MLS. There's nothing secret about it coming soon. It is as visible as an active status. It's searchable. You can go in your saved searches. It shows up on the hot sheets. It's in the MLS. Commission is offered. That means the property's in there for sale, guys. You're offering a commission. If your seller gets an offer on a coming soon, they can take it. And then, you've got to offer pay the compensation that's offered in the MLS. Nothing secret or different about a coming soon in those respects. But there are some limitations because you're not getting hit with days on market, right? And so what are the limitations? The first one is it's limited in its distribution to the MLS. What does that mean? It means it's not going out to third-party sites or IDX. It's not going out to Zillow or Homes.com. It's not going out to all those other agent and broker websites around the world. It's only visible in the MLS. So that's limited marketing. The other limitation is no showings are allowed. And this is consistent with the rationale, which is, hey, I've got this listing. I want to generate some interest. I want to keep, get it ready, but it's really not ready to meet the world 100%. Well, in that case, it's not available for showings, right? It makes perfect sense. If it's ready for showings, then it's active, right? Get it out there and do what you normally do. But so the limitations on coming soon are no showings and it's limited distribution from the MLS. And the other limitation is it's only available for 21 days. 21 days is your time limit. You cannot go beyond that. On day 22, your coming soon will be pushed by the system from coming soon into active. All right, so 21 days is, why is that the limit? Well, because remember, it's coming soon. It's not coming eventually. 3 weeks is soon. And we've found that 3 weeks is about the amount of time that people need to finish getting a property ready to show. So that's coming soon. I'll pause right here and look at some of these chat questions. Libby says, why is coming soon cannot be shown to the listing broker clients? Well, because the rationale for coming soon is not who can see it. It's that no one should be able to see it. And that's the reality, guys. If I didn't point this out, no one can be shown a coming soon listing. Remember, you're saying to us, or you're saying to the MLS or whoever it is that I've got a listing, it's not ready, but I want it in the MLS and I don't want to get hit with days on market. So if it's ready for showings, then you need to put it into active. It's ready to go. Let's see, Tim says, is a for sale sign with a coming soon rider allowed? Yes, that is completely allowed. You can market a coming soon property however you want, including signs. You just can't show it, okay? Chris says, if renovation exceeds 21 days unexpectedly, does the seller sign a modification of terms? Well, Chris, the reality is you can't extend this 21-day period. You can't do it, no matter what. All right, so if you need more time at the end of the 21 days, it doesn't matter what your seller signs. The system is not going to allow it to stay in there for more than 21 days. You need to do something. You may need to bounce into maybe a withdrawn status or something where you're not getting hit with days on market, but you can still market. So you can sort of extend the situation by using withdrawn in Paragon. In September, when you get the new version, you'll have hold status, right? So that'll be an extra feature. You can use that as well. Coming soon is for 21 days. How about more than 21 days? Jin Lee, no, not at all. No extensions to the 21-day period for coming soon at all. Barb says, is there a stop in registered status? I'm having a hard time understanding that question. I'll think about that. Libby's asking about registered. I haven't covered registered yet, but I'm going to, and I'll get to these questions. So let me go on to registered now. So remember, registered status is just a replacement for sending us an exclusion form. It's a situation where your seller says, I don't want this in the MLS, maybe for a week, maybe 2 weeks, or maybe the whole time. Your seller signs an instruction form for you, like a SELM, right? And you have that now. In the past, you needed to, or now you need to send that to us, but when registered is available to you in September, you won't need to do that. You're just going to fill out those five fields at the bottom left corner there. You're going to come into the MLS, you're going to register your listing by putting in the address, the list contract date, the price, the expiration date, and the marketing start date. Those are basically the same things you put on an exclusion form. So once you do that, you register it within that 48 hours, you're good to go. Okay, you can go off and do what you need to do with the property, excluded from the MLS. So as I said at the very beginning, excluding a listing from the MLS is still allowed. What's not allowed is marketing to the public when you're off the MLS. So let's look at the characteristics of registered. The first one is no marketing, just as I just explained, because this is an excluded listing. Therefore, if you market it to the public, you're going to trigger the rule that requires you to put it in the MLS. So no marketing. It's not displayed in the MLS. It's not visible. Let me make this very clear. It's just like if you submit an exclusion form now. No one knows about it. You can't search for registered status, just like you can't search for excluded. It's not visible in the MLS. No one knows about it except for the broker and our staff. No commission is offered. What that means, guys, is it's not in the MLS for sale. So you're not obligated to pay compensation for someone who sees it in the MLS because they can't see it in the MLS. It doesn't mean that if you're off MLS, you don't have to pay a commission. That's up to you, between you and your seller in the RLA, the residential listing agreement. No DOM. Well, obviously, it's not in the MLS. We're not counting any of that marketing time. No distribution. Again, no one knows about this. We're not sending excluded listings or registered listings to Zillow or anywhere else. What would we send anyway? 5 pieces of information. There's no photos or anything. Registered is just an excluded listing. Okay. Now, showings are allowed for a registered, but only to the folks who are the clients of the listing broker. This is not new. So if you exclude your listing and you want to go the office exclusive path, your seller says, I want you to sell this within your office. You can do that, right? But that means you're only talking to the people who you have an AD form signed within the last year or the other agents in your office. So in the process of doing that, in the process of selling this thing off MLS, you'll be allowed to show it to those people only, all right? Because that's not the public. You get a lot of questions about that. If your seller wants you to exclude it, there are going to be a group of people you can try and sell it to and show it to. But those are the people who you have the AD form signed within the last year. Let's take a quick break and look at some of these registered status questions. Libby Sala says, if it's registered, it can be shown to listing broker clients. That's correct, as I just explained. Do I need to submit exclusion form for more than 21 days? Jin Lee. The exclusion in the 21 days, those aren't related concepts. 21 days relates only to coming soon. Registered, if you want to exclude a listing, you can exclude it for however long you want. And if your seller says, I don't want this in the MLS at all, then have them fill out the CELM, giving you that instruction, and then do what they say. There's no limitations on how long a listing can be in registered status, just like there's no limitation on how long you can exclude it. Exclude it for 1 week, 2 weeks, 5 weeks, the whole time, 2 years. It doesn't matter to us. That's between you and your seller. And you don't need to send us a form on that at all. Let's see. Joyce says, if your coming soon listing goes into escrow, can you report it pending? Or do you need to change it to active and then pending? Good question. You can go from coming soon straight to pending. That is absolutely fine, and it makes perfect sense, right? So if your seller accepts an offer while it's in coming soon, so be it. Take it straight to pending. You don't need to go to active. After 21 days, does the MLS automatically put it in active? Libby, yes. On day 22, your coming soon listing will be triggered and moved by the system into active status. Barb, what prevents our brokerage from keeping everything exclusive, selling everything in-house, and never putting their listings in the MLS? Well, nothing. I mean, that's their business process, so long as they don't market to the public. Right? If that's how they want to do it, and that's what their sellers want, we're not going to get in the way of that. The NAR policy and the rule is, and frankly, Barb, that's possible now, right? That's not being changed. What's being changed is you can't do that and market to the public at the same time and have it both ways. So you're going to get a lot of more listings driven into the MLS by the policy that would have not been in there previously. Elena says, if your client does not want it on the MLS, but he does want to sign on the property, does it then fall under registered? No, that's confusing a few different concepts. So if your client doesn't want it on the MLS, but he does want to sign on the property, you've got an issue. Because putting a sign on the property is public marketing. And that is going to mean that that listing will then need to be put in the MLS. So in this situation, you're not going to be able to give your client what they want, right? That's what this rule is about. You excluding it and marketing it to the public by putting up a sign is no longer allowed. That's the big difference. That's the big change here. Doesn't mean that it falls under registered. Registered is excluded. So if you exclude it and it's registered, then it is what it is, just so long as you don't market to the public. Chris says some sellers don't want to pay buyer's agent commission or want to put it in the MLS for marketing purposes. Is this allowed? No, if you put it in the MLS, you have to offer compensation. That is an absolute rule. It doesn't. We have no rule in terms of saying how much. That is up to you, but you have to offer compensation in the MLS. All right, so we've cleared out most of these questions. Let's move on real quick. We will have some new listing measures for you guys. This slide that you're looking at right now is not really related to Clear Cooperation. It's just some things we're putting in for your new Paragon version that you'll have in September. You're familiar with DOM, days on market. That'll still be there, but we're also adding days not active, which is a number count for the time that a listing is spent in, let's say, withdrawn. We're going to have days in pending, which is just like it sounds like. Anytime that the property has been in active under contract or pending, I know you don't have active under contract, but you will, that are not counted in the DOM. And then we're going to have this count called DL, days listed, list contract date until list finalization. So that's all days that a listing has been in the MLS. You will be able to count that. These numbers won't be available. They won't be public facing. They'll just be available in your agent full. So that's coming for you. Let's see, there's a new question here from Jennifer. When marketing a coming soon listing, do you have to state the date available in the marketing? Yes, you do. So let's talk about some of the specific rules. So Rule 9.8 has been revised to make it clear that you can't do showings while you're in coming soon or withdrawn status. So that's the change to Rule 9.8. 10.7, this is the status that covers Jennifer's question. The coming soon status is now defined here. Note that in the third section it says marketing and advertising are still permitted, and it shall include the date for which property will become active. So wherever it's reasonable and you're advertising your coming soon, excuse me, just make sure you note that it's coming soon, and if it's possible, put in the active date. So when are the showings going to start? If you have a sign writer that says coming soon, we don't expect you to have the active date on that. But if you have flyers and email blasts and things like that, try to make sure you have that information in there. Withdrawn status is been slightly revised. You can market a withdrawn, but you can't show it, so it's very similar to a coming soon. Withdrawn is generally used for a more significant pause in the life of the listing. Let's say you've got significant problems with the property and you don't want to cancel your listing contract, obviously, but you want to stop marketing it so significantly, and you're certainly not going to be able to do showings. In September, you will have hold status as well in your new version of Paragon. Hold is more meant for some more temporary pauses, up to 30 days, and it's very similar. There's hold for you. You'll be able to market. So when you're in hold or withdrawn, guys, you don't have to take your signs down. You don't have to stop your marketing efforts, but you just can't show the property. So what are the negative consequences of breaking any of these rules? Well, it's right there. I'll let it sink in for a minute. The fines for these rules will be 1% of the list price, no less than $500, no more than $2,500. So we're using a sliding scale because we have a lot of areas that we service as an MLS, and not everybody has the same median list price. All right, there's some areas where the list price is much lower than where you might be working. Also, maybe there's a small parcel that's for sale for $50,000, right? That price should be equitable. The citation should be equitable corresponding to the price. Why 2,500? Is that a lot? Nationally speaking, it is not. What do I mean? I mean, it's on the low side. This policy is national. Every MLS is having to deal with it. The majority of them start at $3,000, $4,000, and $5,000 and go up with doubled and tripled fines for repeat offenses. We're not doing any of that. We're hoping that behavior and understanding and education will help us avoid issuing any of these citations, but it should be significant. It's a very important policy. It should cost a little more than you can just absorb as the cost of doing business. So if you're doing a lot of high-end homes and you just say, well, I'll just violate this rule and pay the fine, you know, do what I want. We're hoping you don't, but you know, hopefully the $2,500 will dissuade you from taking that option. All these violations come with warnings, guys. You're not just going to wake up with a citation in your mailbox or your email box. It will give you an opportunity to correct. And what that means is if we get a report that says, hey, this is being marketed off MLS, we'll wait 1 business day because you have that amount of time to get it in, and then send you a warning if it's not in, and then we'll give you another whole business day to put it in. So we're hoping that education and understanding of the policy and compliance with the policy will be good, and we won't have to do any of this that you see on the screen. Let's see. Barb says, oh, so these are some questions in here about the listing measures. Barb says days listed equals all listing contract days or days in MLS to close. So it's from the listing contract date to a finalized status. And that's it. Tina Bartel says, so DNA and DL are visible only to the listing agent and listing broker, not other agents. No, it'll be available. The other agents will be able to see it in the MLS, right, in their agent full. That's the reason it's there, is for research purposes and for your marketing plan, so you can figure out what's going on with the listing. So you'll be able to see that in any listing. It just won't be, you won't be going out to the public. You won't be able to send it out in any of the listings that you send out to your buyers, or it certainly won't be going out to syndication. And Jennifer says, is it possible to print out these charts? If you are referring to this particular slideshow, yes. We have, and that brings me to my next couple of slides. I'll tell you about that in a second, Jennifer. The timeline, May 1st and May 4th, were the dates when it started, and when we started enforcement on it, those dates have come and gone. So here we are, we're fully live with it. In summer, so September, you guys are going to get the new version of Paragon, which means you'll have registered status, and you'll have hold status, and you'll be able to put in up to 75 photos, and you'll have all sorts of other fun things that we've developed for you in this new Paragon platform. And again, we'll put out a lot of information and heads up type releases for you guys to know when that's coming. Until you switch over to the new Paragon platform, just continue doing your exclusion process as you have always done, right? Getting a signed form from your seller and then sending it in to us. And then when registered comes along, you won't have to do that anymore. We have a lot of resources, as I said earlier. We have a full page on our website for all of the Clear Cooperation stuff. We have webinars, we have special videos dedicated to coming soon and marketing and all of that good stuff. We have a special email box where you can send us questions, clearcooperation@crmls.org. We have FAQs on that page, etc., etc. And to answer Jennifer's question, this slideshow is available for you to download, if that's what you are referring to. So that's it for the CCP. I'm going to look here at the chat. What about Matrix? If you're referring, Barb, to the slideshow for Matrix, yes, that is available on our page as well. Everything's there for you guys. So this presentation was meant to be for CCP and top violations. We're about 45 minutes in. I don't want to keep you more than an hour. So what I'm going to do is go ahead to my top violations. Let's Let's see if I can find this. Here we go. Forgive me, I will have it for you in a minute. And I'll try to run through this in 15 minutes. It could go longer if you guys have a lot of questions, but that's entirely up to you. Almost there. And I am now going to share this new screen. And here we go. So for top violations, this slideshow does include some of the clear cooperation stuff, so I'm going to try to move through that quickly. I'm not going to get into all of these admin slides and feature slides. I want to get to the rules that you guys have to be aware of. I will tell you that all the rules that you guys are living under come from other agents and brokers. We don't make them up on our own here at SEER MLS. They come through NAR and CAR. They're committees all made up of agents and brokers, and then ultimately they come down through our rules committee and our board of directors, who are all agents and brokers as well. You can find this stuff on the resource page. If you are interested, on our compliance page, we have a ton of stuff, not just for CCP, but also for everything else under the sun for compliance. Especially important, you guys, is get the FAQ, the compliance FAQ. It will answer 99% of all your questions. And if you read that thing and are fairly familiar with it, you'll be ahead of almost all your peers in this respect. So the citation policy is similar to the rule set, but it's more of a list of every kind of rule that we do enforce. We have about 63 on there, and a lot of them come with warnings and some don't. And the citation policy is 2 pages. You can go on our website and get that as well and have that with you and see, you know, what the rule is, whether it gets a warning or not, the summary of the rule, and then what the fine is. Keep in mind that if you ever get a citation, you have 20 days to pay or to challenge it. So you can submit a citation review request and your invoice will be put on hold, and we can follow this. It's kind of like an appeal process that we work with your association on. But after 20 days, if you don't pay your citation, you can't appeal it, and you can only pay. Otherwise, you might face a suspension. So top violations. Again, I've got to move quickly. A lot of them are about photos, guys. The most common photo violation, and the absolute most common violation of all time, is branding, which is what? It's really, you have your sign in your photo, okay? You can't do that. It's not allowed because these listings, the photos, are being sent out to other people's buyers. I mean, basically that's what the listings are there for, right? For other agents to take and sell your listing. And if you have your photo in there, or your sign and your contact information, that's really not fair. So that's called branding, and that's the #1 violation. Generally about 40% of them a month are that particular bad decision. The other things you can't put in your photos are, again, phone numbers, website addresses, messages, images of people and animals. You can use photos of animals if it's part of the property, right? So if you're selling a horse property and you have horses in your photos, that's fine. You can have people in there as long as they're not identifiable. I mean, most common situation where people show up in photos is like a beach scene or something. You have a coastal property and you've got a drone photo of a beach, and there's people on the sand. You can't tell who they are. That's allowed. So if you're going to use images of animals or people, make sure the people are not identifiable, because if they are, they could sue you, and you don't want that. And make sure that the animals make sense in the context of the listing. Other photograph issues, important, is the copyright issue. And I'll cut to the chase on this is, if you didn't take a photo yourself, you need written permission from the person who did in order to put it in the MLS. It's as clear as I can make this. This is a significant fine. It's $1,500, because copyright law is severe in its consequences. You can get hit with up to $150,000 per unauthorized use, not from us, but in court. You can get sued under the Federal Copyright Act. So we take this very seriously. If you have taken the photos yourself, or the video, let's say, you are the copyright owner under the law. You can do whatever you want with it. But if you didn't, you need written permission, right? I don't care if it's a professional photographer or if it's your seller. I have a lot of situations lately where somebody gets in trouble for this and they're like, well, my seller gave me those photos. They said they were theirs. Well, did you get written permission? Because it always turns out that the seller got those from a previous listing agent who paid a photographer. So you've got to be extremely careful with copyright issues. Just by putting a photo or media into the MLS in your listing, you're telling us that you have the right to do that. So you better have that right. How do you get it? Try to use the PIA form. It is a sufficient agreement, and I don't care how well you know your photographer. Don't sign their agreement. I've looked at hundreds, and they're generally not sufficient. And by the way, I'm one of the lawyers here at MLS, so I'm telling you this from a legal perspective. Use the PIA and get it signed before you put the images or the media into the listing, and you'll be protected. You should also have this, even if you're not putting the images in the MLS, because you can get hit for copyright violations just for making flyers or putting it on your own website. So be extremely careful when it comes to copyright issues and not stealing photos from the MLS. Don't ever right-click and save on photos from a listing and put them in your listing. That is a copyright violation. Don't ever take photos from a professional photographer and put them in the MLS without this agreement here. And if your seller or anyone else gives you photos, get the written permission and use a PIA. And then get it before you put it in to the MLS. Exterior photos, believe it or not, this is still a fairly common violation. Even in a day and age when we have the most phenomenal cameras ever in our cell phones, there are still people who don't get their photos in, at least one photo of the exterior of the property into the MLS in 72 hours. You don't have to have them all in, you just have to have one. Chris says, I never understood this policy. If I took the photo myself and branded, why is this not allowed? Keep Zillow and other agents from using my listing photos. Well, first of all, when you put your photos into the MLS, you're agreeing that wherever they're going, you've already previously agreed to that. You don't want a photo to go out anywhere else other than the MLS. You need to talk to your broker and say no to syndication or say no to IDX. You can't put branded photos in, as I explained before, Chris, because those listings and those photos in those listings are being used by your colleagues to send to their buyers. They shouldn't have to have the listing broker's information in a photo that they send to their client. Can you see how that might be problematic? That's one of the main reasons why this rule is in place. Barb says, I insisted on owning photos before I hired a company for my last listing. Let's see. I guess you're saying thank you for the PIA, and I can tell you that's from CAR. Please use it, as I said, and I will repeat this because it's important. Even the best intentioned photographer who puts together an agreement for you to sign usually falls short from a legal perspective. You owe it to yourself to use a good contract when you're using somebody else's media, because the Copyright Act is terrible. You can get in a lot of trouble. I will usually tell a story about a huge lawsuit against Zillow. I won't tell it now, but believe me, you don't want to get sued. Use the PIA. Inaccurate information. Generally, you are responsible for the information and the accuracy that you put into your listing, to the best of your knowledge. This one comes with a warning, and almost all of these get fixed. This is something like wrong APN, wrong room count, wrong square footage, or something along those lines. We'll get a report on it. We'll send you a warning, and most of the time it gets fixed. We don't often get into huge disputes on this because unless it's verifiable from any outside source. We're not going to fight with you as the listing agent. It's your responsibility to have good information in there. Public remarks. There are lots of things you shouldn't say in the remarks that are going out to the public. Some of them are very common sense, like gate codes and showing instructions. You shouldn't put your own contact information in the public remarks. You need to limit that information to the features of the property, the description of the property, the characteristics of the property only. I've seen some wild ones. I've seen some funny ones where, you know, somebody has said, please don't show before 5 o'clock because the only people home are the kids by themselves. It's silly, but it's true. Or they'll put the gate code into the community. Right? This is a field for you to describe the features of the property. You don't want to put anything else in there. We will remove that language with no questions asked, and we reserve the right to do that. So if you have other info that you need the other agents to see, you know, you put it in the advertising remarks, or you can put it into the confidential remarks. So those are the main top violations. It doesn't usually get any more sophisticated than that. We do have a lot of resources, and we continue to try to provide you guys as much training and education as we can. Please go to our website. Please spend a few minutes there on the compliance page or on the training page and download the FAQ. You didn't hear me earlier. Get the FAQ, frequently asked questions. It's got about 60 questions on there that cover about 95% of the things we deal with. You read through that once and you're going to be in much better shape from a compliance perspective. I know this has been a lot of information today. I hope I answered all your questions. If you have more questions, please email us to compliance or call in or to compliance@crmls.org. Go to the website, or you can even call into our support line there at our call center. They handle a lot of calls. They're very, very well versed in all this stuff. And you can also reach a compliance analyst through our chat sessions. We don't take inbound phone calls in compliance because we've got so much investigating work going on, but we will help you as much as we can through chat. So yeah, I appreciate you guys spending time and learning and getting better at your job. Joyce says, shouldn't advertising remarks go in the supplementary remarks? Isn't the advertising remarks used to keep the listing from going to third-party vendors? Well, the advertising remarks will go to the third-party vendors, but to be honest with you, Joyce, they don't often publish those. It's like you put a branded video in. They're probably not going to let that show, and they have the right to do that. All right, so again, we're right at 1 hour. I hope it went well for you guys. I'll stop sharing my screen, and again, please, oh wait, we got some more questions in here. Oh, there's one from Debbie saying that people say in their confidential remarks that they don't take liability for the size of rooms, and it's agent and buyer's responsibility to confirm accuracy. Yes, that is allowed. It's pretty standard boilerplate. Hey, I'm doing the best I can. I mean, and guys, that same language is in the RPA, right? The buyer has their due diligence, takes responsibility for a lot of that stuff. So, all right. Thanks again for your time. I'm not assuming that anybody else is going to jump on and sign me off or say goodbye, but so I'll do that now. Again, keep in touch and let us know if we can do anything else for you guys, and enjoy your day. Bye-bye.